If it wasn't so sad, it would be a joke. 2016, it was over. That task was over, presented, discussed, and put into a dusty cupboard in the government because there was a lot of upheaval. What some people have not realized is that BBMP itself, for that matter, any government office, is highly understaffed, highly under-resourced, highly skilled manpower absent. And the situation could actually be, and I think it will be, a lot worse than what it is right now. I see the splitting as an end product, as an end process somewhere down the line. The assumption of the restructuring bill or the restructuring committee is that size is the issue. I don't think that's true at all. You have not even given a shot at what is both constitutional and what is there staring you in the face. So in the money chain, you just introduced a new set of people who are actually a lot more closer to the project. The mayors are not part of a steering committee executive council. Where else do you want to go? What else? Where else do you need an evidence of what the intention of the bill as it is? 4 years, we had a bureaucracy without elected representatives, and the city being run by the MLAs or from the state government. It hasn't worked. There is no reason why this should work. We can't even manage our bank accounts in BBMP at a centralized level. 5 corporations, multiply that problem about 5 times. There are committees which have this God complex and 5 wise men can solve the problems of the world. It doesn't work that way. There are no shortcuts and no solutions where you say, whoa, one huge system and all that. There are inherent issues and we have to work at that. And the results will come. The government is famous for taking your ideas and then taking one aspect of that idea out of context and then having a fall guy to say, but that was their idea. Right, it's not our idea. Constitutionally, it's invalid because you cannot build a road which is not there in the master plan. And where is the master plan? There is no master plan. Why is there no master plan? The master plan can only happen by the MPC. Why is there no MPC? Because there is no elections. We are ready to take it up to the legal case and go up to the Supreme Court.
Hello and welcome to OoruLabs podcast. And I'm your host Sathya Sankaran. The government of Karnataka is intending to create a Greater Bengaluru Authority on the lines of the Greater London Authority in order to manage the city better. So they are proposing to split Bengaluru into multiple city corporations. Now, this has created a lot of heartburn among citizens, mostly because they don't seem to know how the GBA is going to help Bengaluru. And most people seem to be against the idea of even splitting Bengaluru into multiple city corporations. So I spoke to Vijayan Menon, who is the president of Citizens Action Forum, which is a civic society body, non-profit, which holds the government accountable for following the process of doing things in the city. Whether it is the master plan or the BBMP issues, Vijayan has been an active citizen fighting it out in the courts to ensure that we don't go overboard on what we are trying to do. But does the GBA itself have merit? I have had multiple conversations on this, one of which is with Ravichander, where he explains why Bengaluru needs to be split into multiple corporations. You can watch that. I've also had one conversation with Srikanth on what does the city corporation really need. I've had multiple other conversations with Alok Prasanna Kumar, Anjali Karol Mohan, and also with Srikanth Narasimhan. You can see all of those in season 1 of my podcast. Let's hear from Vijayan on what he thinks about the Greater Bengaluru Authority bill. Vijayan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Satya. Let's have some nice, meaty discussions.
I'm hoping for fireworks, as always from you.
I'm much older now. I'm much more sober.
All of us are, but still I think a little bit of fireworks is useful, especially when it comes to this Greater Bengaluru Authority bill. So you and I had this conversation over phone. I just thought we should talk about it on air and get everybody to know what is going on. So what do you think about the GBA bill and the Greater Bengaluru Authority and the committee that is doing all of these things? You have your own thoughts. Let's start with that.
If it wasn't so sad, it would be a joke. I would be laughing at it.
Okay.
But Unfortunately, that's a sad part of it. But in general speaking, I'm looking at this as a joke because it's an attempt at a few things which will not yield anything, and that's where the sad part is. And while we get into details later, there seems to be some other agenda uh, of this whole bill and passing of the bill and the way it's written. It doesn't seem to have much to do with actually wanting to improve Bangalore. There seems to be two, three other agendas which are there.
What do you think those
is the
are?
way I look at it. See, we are quite clear that the way it has been done and the timing of it, especially. Remember that this could have been brought at any time, now, later, etc. The timing is very curious. Just when you're forced to have councillor elections. Because let's just go back on the councillor election business. 4 years we have not had a council, a BBMP council. First, it was brought for delimitation purposes, went on and on and on. Then it was reservation. Then it was the Lok Sabha elections. Then it was the MLA elections, assembly elections first, and then the Lok Sabha elections. Okay, now all that is over, right? And suddenly we get a new bill, right? I mean, there are enough inside people who have said that the objective is to go to the court where this the election BBMP election issue is in the courts, is to go there and say we have a silver bullet and we have we need time.
So that is kind of understandable from these people because they've always been trying to not have a city corporation, and we know the reasons as to why these people, the political class, do not want to have a corporation. They do not want to share the spoils. Many people have said that. But before that, there is this committee which has been working on it for quite a few years, right? I mean, 1 year, 2 year, whatever it is, the committee was trying to create a new structure on the likes of London and things like that. So it's while the government of the day may have chosen appropriate timing that suited them, the bill was peddled to, I mean, the committee has been peddling this idea to everybody else. So the idea itself is of the GBA. What do you think of that?
No, not so true. Let's just do the chronology. The bill was, or the recommendation of the Patel Committee and the three wise men was over in 2016. 2016, it was over. That task was over, presented, discussed, and put into a dusty cupboard in the government because there was a lot of upheaval. What you have now is that cupboard being opened, dusted, maybe three cosmetic points being changed so as to say there's something new, and then represent it again. So that is what I'm saying is the question. If it was a committee which has been working on it extensively and they've been going on, and now's the time when that so-called report has come to fruition and is being presented, you have to look at it in a slightly different way. And here I'm not talking the contents of the bill. I'm not talking of the contents of the report of the thing, but it's the timing. 2016, it was discussed, it was junked, it went into the cupboard, dusty cupboard. It's come back now, cosmetically changed. That is why I'm saying the timing is extremely curious, sir.
What do you think of the idea of the Greater Bengaluru Authority itself? See, I've heard you say on the phone, we were talking, is it even in line with the 74th Amendment? Is this what we should be doing? Should it be another way? What happened to the MPC? What happened to the BMRDA? What are all those agencies doing now? Is this a rehashed thing, or is it really going to make some difference? An authority itself of a Greater Bengaluru Authority, is that idea even feasible? And even the splitting of the corporations, right? I mean, they are basically saying we need to break Bengaluru down into smaller, manageable pieces. Is that even required?
Let's start with that, because the constitution aspect is a huge one, and we will have to, and that's where the real meat of the whole issue and the whole objections would come. But let's look at the other one, that is breaking up Bangalore into 5 corporations.
Okay.
Or 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever it is. What some people have not realized is that BBMP itself, or for that matter, any government office, is highly understaffed, highly under-resourced, highly skilled manpower absent or negligible. And that's one of the bigger problems of the BBMP and other departments, that we skill people who are really able to do that. Town planners, senior engineers, etc. These are not easy people to get for a government, and it's a scarce commodity. Imagine multiplying that by 5 times, that scarcity, multiplying by 5 times. Having five corporations is not a joke. It's not a hole in the wall. It cannot be a hole in the wall operation. It can't be a hole in the wall operation. And what you will end up is actually at a situation far worse than what we have right now. We will have corporations which are undermanned, understaffed, under-resourced, and the situation could actually be, and I think it will be, a lot worse than what it is right now. I see the splitting as an end product, as an end process somewhere down the line. There's a lot of other things that need to be done, can be done. The assumption of the restructuring bill or the restructuring committee is two. We'll discuss one of them right now. Is that size is the issue? That manageability is and governance is a function of size. I don't think that's true at all. If that was the case, then just extend that logic. Karnataka is too big. Every district must have a CM. India is too big. Every state must have a PM. So the size logic of manageability is just a reflection of the BBMP and government agencies not having enough resources, skilled manpower, skilled, and I use the word skilled resources, expert people to manage. That is why the size is becoming difficult. By multiplying it by 5 times, you're not solving the problem. You're just creating a huge resource crunch, whereby you end up at a worse possible situation.
So let us say Baby MP was managing 1,000 square kilometers. It's beyond the 736 that it is now, and it needs approximately, let's say, 100 people. If you divided 1,000 by 5 and each corporation got 200, would it still be, let's say they have 100 people and they need 500 to actually manage something of that size? Is it possible that by splitting, they may be able to resource it more efficiently? Or are you saying that that will actually mean more because each corporation will have additional staffing? So it will not become 500, it might become 700.
It's a government organization. Where have you seen a government organization which doesn't bloat? A government organization by nature will bloat. And what you will have is unskilled people manning the stuff. That's what you'll have. You'll have the chaiwalas, you'll have the peons, you'll have the clerks loaded with that. But none of the critical functions can be duplicated that easily. The most important point here is that even the restructuring committee report touched upon this. That and this is something which people don't know, and that's a part of the restructuring committee report, which I think is valid and which we should bring it back to the ground. The splitting of the BBMP is one part of that report, but that's the only one that's been picked up.
Yeah.
Another one, and there were 5 reports, 5 different headings, and one of them was about staffing. It was about divisions, how to restructure the divisions, and so that the job definitions are a lot clearer, and overlaps of various divisions being done, how to recruit, how to skill, how to be accountable. Accountable, of course, they didn't go too deeply in. These are the more of the core issues of BBMP and what ails us. Now, the splitting and 5 corporations could be something down the line, subject to the fact it's a journey. You have to do a lot of other things before you could even think of something like that. Is my contention. If it is legally,
We'll come to the legal part. I just want to kind of, again, try to think through this whole objective of trying to split this. One of the things is they are trying to say Bengaluru has become bigger because we've been swallowing up the villages and we are growing. We don't seem to grow like other countries or other cities. Like Mumbai is not everything, including Thane, Dombivli, and Navi Mumbai. All of those things don't just become Mumbai. They are a part of the greater Mumbai region, but they all have their own city corporations. The political representation and splitting is what I think is the meat, right? I mean, we all treat BBMP as an administrative entity, and which it is right now, without even the corporators. BBMP runs because the administrator are there, and you can, like you said, you can add more. Like somebody else also said on the podcast, you can kind of get more staff, but it'll always bloat at the group C and D levels, right? I mean, the talent at the higher levels are definitely there. Is there a validity in decentralizing? I agree, you're saying it'll come down the line, and is down the line already there? When do you know what is the readiness at which you're saying, okay, now we are ready to have political representation and splitting? Shouldn't even be talking about splitting if we didn't swallow these things. We are continuing to swallow. Now there's a new Bengaluru rural with Kanakpura in it and Ramnagara in it. Who knows? All the surrounding towns will start being swallowed up. Is that even the right way to go? What do you think?
First of all, I don't think it's the right way to go. But anyway, let's just look at parallel analogy. Right? Let's look at the corporate world. Right? Let's look at Hindustan Lever. Let's look at a huge corporation which has much more manpower and turnover, etc. Now, it could also be said we are so unmanageable that all my regional managers and all my zones should become different companies. That's exactly what you're doing here. But how do they work? They work through delegation. They work through checks and balances, etc. And please remember, the BBMP, though I hate to call the current outfit as BBMP because that's the wrong terminology, because BBMP exists only when there's executive and the elected together, council. There are zones. There are commissioners. There is a decentralized concept. How is it that the corporation method is going to change anything? We already have and should have zones and zonal commissioners, zonal representatives, zonal teams, zonal political representation, all that. The splitting of BBMP into 5 corporations is an idea which is, it's been pulled out of the hat. There is already a lot of things. And my point is that you have not even given a shot at what is both constitutional and what is there staring you in the face. And you go and put your foot into a deeper water where, God knows how you're going to come out. Something like 5 corporations is a 5-year project. To get five corporations running is a 5-year project, with confusions in between. And it doesn't matter for the state government if there's confusion, because ultimately the guys who suffer will only be the citizens. But the political objectives or whatever other objectives are to be had is served. So it is actually a very selfish, and we will discuss the selfish part of it a bit later. It's actually a very selfish bill or concept which has nothing to do with political representation. In fact, it has got everything other than political representation to do with it. And it's a bureaucracy and state government run act to control Bangalore. That's about it.
I want to jump into the selfish part, and I have a theory on that. There is this angst from East Bengaluru, for example, which has all the IT parks, which deliver a lot of revenue, right? It creates jobs, real estate, everything else, huge commercialization. And they are saying we're generating so much of revenue, but we are getting very little of the expense in terms of infrastructure, whatever the state of the situation might be. Now, on the other hand, they are saying the rest of the Bengaluru is feeding off of us, right? There are massive residential areas. I would call them residential, but there are massive residential areas in maybe the south of Bengaluru and the west of Bengaluru or somewhere else, which are just sitting and eating off of all the revenue that is coming there. We suffer the consequences of commercialization, but you guys don't have any targets on raising revenues for yourself. You're not contributing. You're just eating off of it. We just want to be our own corporation and fend for ourselves, and we'll probably be richer than you guys, and we'll probably have more money to put more infrastructure for ourselves. It is true that zonal revenue targets are also there, but it is not decentralized. You give the corporate example, for example. Probably the P&L is also decentralized, north zone, south zone. You handle your own revenues and you will be accountable at that level. Do you think that is one of the reasons this is coming up? Is some of the richer areas are basically saying, you're eating off of us. You don't want any commercialization in your area. You just want the residential pieces. You don't want even a single shop coming up, but you want somebody else to earn for you and give you all the nice living.
Spoken like a true corporate. That particular not you, but I'm saying that entire logic is a classical corporate talk, which has got no foundation in what we are as a country, and we are as a unit of people. If you are all of these things, all you have to do is start looking to the next level, the country and the socialism of the country. We are not a capitalist run country. We are a socialistic country, the way it is. So taxes which come from here, I'm a taxpayer. My tax goes somewhere else. I could be saying that at a micro level. I'm paying the tax. And why aren't I getting the benefit? Why is my money going to feed the poor somewhere else? It's the same logic that I should be able to do that. Number one. Number two, if you look at a historical perspective, they are actually the newer industry is actually making benefits out of 100 years of other core Bangalore's investment into Bangalore. So if we want to do a balance sheet, then we start looking at a balance sheet which goes back in history of what was given to them as a thing. Slicing it at a point in time makes the argument extremely mathematical. As soon as you look at the cultural context and you look at history, then you know that. But I don't think that's an issue. I think there is definitely a point to be taken that distribution of income which is coming in. There is a particular the how it's distributed needs to have a relook, and areas which have much more potential to grow need to be given inputs. And it might not come from the taxations or the property tax itself. It'll actually have to come from grants and from other kind of infrastructure, right? The thing about not wanting commercialization in residential areas is a separate topic. It's a huge separate topic. I personally do not believe in that. I personally do not believe that residential areas should not have commercial establishments. My point is that every attempt to do it has made the entire residential area into commercial. So if you look at a residential area as a zone and you decide which part of this zone should have commercial, which part of the zone should have shops, then it starts falling into place. But the bureaucrat writes a simple rule saying roads of 30 feet can have this. That's not the way to look at planning. That is a very lazy way of looking at planning. By sitting in a thing and doing a calculator and saying 30 feet, 40 feet. Planning is about going micro and seeing where the rubber hits the soil. This is an area where there is some potential for commercial, and this serves extra. And so this subzone of a subzone is being made. You will not have problems. It is when you say that commercialization can happen anywhere in that whole zone is where the problem is. Anyway, that's off the topic, but I was just clarifying that.
No, not off the topic. I think we're just trying to understand how we have a status quo in BBMP right now. This is what this thing is. We don't have an elected council. It works as an administrative entity, and almost everybody seems to be comfortable with it. We have a minister leading the city, and we have the MLAs making the calls that needs to be done. And we all agree that this delaying tactic is beneficial for whoever it is, and we want to get the thing going. Where do you see this now? There are lots of problems with the existing structure of BBMP itself. You talked about zonal. We are not strengthening that. We are jumping into, your theory is that we are jumping into the corporation even before strengthening the zonal units and beefing them up with the staff and then seeing how they work or whatever it is, right? So you have a thing of journey. What is the selfishness you were hinting at? Is it just the political selfishness you're talking about, or is there something else you're looking at?
Definitely political and the bureaucracy. So I said state government and the political selfishness and the bureaucracy selfishness. If you look at the current bill, and we're not talking about the bill which was recommended by the committee, but what has been tabled into it, you will see that it is basically a state government stroke bureaucracy run system, right? And we can go into a little bit of examples in the details. So from that perspective, it's extremely selfish in terms of power, holding power and decision making, and it's a very self-serving kind of a act built for the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy runs without any downward accountability. As far as the political class is concerned, well, there are two things here. One is that as soon as you have the elected council, another layer of political strength comes into the picture, and there are two problems in that. And we all know that there is a money chain involved in the political thing. So in the money chain, you have just introduced a new set of people who are actually a lot more closer to the project, right? Number one. Number two, this is where the next rung of politicians come up, and they threaten the status quo of the older class. Please remember, our first Prime Minister, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, he was a corporator. That's how most of our great political leaders have come up. They have not come up from the sky. Even the existing MLAs that you have, they've all come up from the corporator level at some level when they were 25 years old or 26 years old or whatever, except the guys who are hereditary posting, and let's leave that aside. But the bulk of them have come up through the corporator level, and so there is a resistance there. Unfortunately, the second point is very, very across party lines. There is this whole across party lines that we don't want to have councillors, so as the money chain is not cut, so as the power is not done. The current government could have another problem, because when the Lok Sabha elections, the city went the opposition way. That is the BJP way. So they might actually have a fear that if they have councillor elections, that they will lose the Bangalore council. So splitting and chipping and chopping and chipping, or pushing the elections indefinitely into the horizon is probably the strategy. So any of these things I've said is a streak of selfishness and self-serving is very, very evident. Is very, very evident.
No, I completely agree with you on the point of where leadership comes from. It seems to me that people are directly contesting MLA elections without having the experience of accountability and governance at a smaller level. So if the corporators actually manage their wards and they are recognized for doing something, of course they do it without the actual accountability. They may do it in as a party worker in some corner. They don't actually hold the accountability. So they don't know how to kind of manage all these conflicts and resolutions and all that. So it's good training ground for people to be able to show their chops in managing a ward and then graduate into doing something at the MLA. So all of these are being sidestepped. You're looking at what you said is nepotism and things like that, and some other rules of the game, which directly catapults you into managing a large constituency and get a ticket based on money. So there's a lot of downsides for citizens in this by not having corporators. But I wanted to jump into those 3-4 things you said, that the selfish nature of how this bill has been turned around to redefine GBA as the politicians look at it. Of course, the minister has gone on record saying that, oh, we did this because we don't want to completely change the system. We want to do it slowly, things like that. So one or two of this was while the GBA drafted bill said it will be a coordination body. These guys went and set it up as a not planning is still with the BDA, but they said we will have departments on waste and other things, right? There were a few other things. The bill also said you take the grants and distribute it equitably so that these competitions don't exist. But these guys are saying, no, the corporations need to give us the revenue share as well. So we, so they're trying to do that as well, right? Then there was this whole standing committee thing. They didn't want to get rid of it. They still want their standing committees, right? Then the proportional representation of the ward was something this GBA draft was trying to say that, but they are going back to nominated. We'll nominate 10 people and then they'll be the people. So there's a lot of this selfishness that has come in. How do you think we are going to go forward with these kind of things? The other thing is the constitution. Will come to this, but do you?
Yeah, we'll come to the constitution. But let me just give you another example of how the current GBA bill is self-serving. there's a whole GBA which constitutes with mayors and all kinds of people. The list is about 20-25. There's a steering committee after that. If you go deep into the, it's called the Executive Council of the GBA. All right. Now, an Executive Council is the day-to-day operations.
Correct.
We know how that is. The Executive Council does not have the mayors. It has the commissioners, but the commissioners don't have a vote. Right? Elsewhere, it's been written the commissioners don't have a vote. So you have the Bangalore minister in charge, right? You have the ex IAS bureaucrat heads of the very parastatals, and you have commissioners who don't have a vote. The mayors are not part of a steering committee executive council. Where else do you want to go? Where else do you need an evidence of what the intention of the bill as it is? But I still believe the intention is to postpone elections. But even if it comes through, this is what it is. It is a bureaucracy come state government run venture. But my contention is that hasn't worked. 4 years, that's exactly what we had. 4 years, we had a bureaucracy without elected representatives, and the city being run by the MLAs or from the state government. It hasn't worked. There is no reason why this should work. We have to ultimately go down to what we are. I mean, we are a democracy. However imperfect that democracy is, that's where the principles of governance lie. We have to find our solutions there. We cannot find the solutions at somewhere else just supplant something else for convenience and think it will be either sustainable or it will work, or even if it's moral. And therein comes the constitutional and the other areas of
Let's talk about that. The 74th Amendment clearly says you need to have a 5-year elected council, and then within 6 months you need to have an election to make sure that the next one continues, and you don't do that. Is there anything unconstitutional about GBA?
Of course there is. Of course there is. The 74th Amendment, or what we know it as the Nagapalika Act, it's let's leave the mechanics out of it. It is fundamentally a devolution of power to the third tier. Devolution of power to the third tier, whereby municipalities run the cities.
Right.
The 74th Amendment, Nagapalika Act, is for metropolitans and cities. Its spirit and, of course, the rulings are for devolution of power from the state into the municipality. And to do that, what we have, obviously, the block there is the corporators, is the council. So without even having mentioned it, all the other things fall into place. There is no place for a parastatal or a BWSSP to report into the chief minister or the central government or the state government. It has to report into the municipality. So all the other things which the report or others have said, the coordination of various places, they are not original ideas. There's nothing great about those ideas. It's already embedded in the Constitution. So I mean, somebody who comes and says, I've made a great thing in this report, and the big idea is that we've got the parastatals to come together. It's not a great idea. It's there in our Constitution, and that's what devolution of power is all about, the municipality running it.
So the 74th Amendment clearly says that the state governments provides the monies, whether it is grants or whatever it is, to the Nagarpalika, which is the municipal corporation or the municipal municipal panchayat or what? The third body, right? So the third level of the governance. It does not recognize an intermediary between these two things.
No, it does not.
If the Greater Bengaluru Authority was just a coordination committee, it wouldn't be a problem. And even then, the devolution of grants cannot be given to the GBA, which is a committee, to further distribute, correct?
Absolutely.
But if the GBA, as passed now, becomes a corporation with executive powers and say, give me revenue also, give me this also, then that effectively becomes the municipal body, because devolution is happening with that. Then what are the rest of the corporations doing? There is no fourth level. The fourth level is only the ward committees.
Ward committees. So the corporation, as I said, the corporation is a hole in the wall operation. hole in the wall operation. You have a ward committee and you have that's what it is. Because anyway, you won't have staff for the corporations anyway. So it is a hole in the wall, which is why I started by saying if it wasn't sad, it's a joke, but unfortunately, it's also very sad.
So if I posit to you that if there was no GBA and we had 5, 7, whatever else corporations, go back to Bengaluru being 736 and everything else being what it is in its own small corporation, we wouldn't have this problem, right? They would have to fend for themselves. They would have to have their own elections. You just don't want this GBA. And ostensibly, in my last conversation, the name Bengaluru wanted to be preserved, and these different corporations needed to be called Bengaluru North, South, and everything, because there's a brand Bengaluru that they wanted to preserve. Is that even a valid argument? Why don't we just split these into multiple corporations and say, do your own elections, do your own thing? Why do you need report directly to the state government? What are we afraid of losing? Why shouldn't Bengaluru not be called Yalanka Nadu or whatever else, and the East Bengaluru be called Whitefield, White Mahadevpura? Why not?
Well, basically, the reason why the politicians themselves will not want it, and the entire real estate sector will not want it, which would mean that the real estate value, anybody who holds on to the Bangalore name, will have a higher real estate thing. And please remember that 80% of our politicians' background, if you ask their job, I'm not talking of the MLAs, but I'm talking of the workers, their biodata will show I'm in real estate. Right, real estate. That's the principal occupation of most of our politico friends. Okay, so anybody who holds on to the Bangalore name will have, from the real estate perspective, will have that. And we are also a building magnet city. I mean, there are a lot of building companies, real estate, great developers who have done a lot of good stuff. Some not so good stuff. You try to get this across to them first before you even try to do that. They will resist it to the core and core and core. Chase the money line, chase the where the money is going, and then you will find the answers in most of our cases in Bangalore. But on a more serious note, what you said, yes, if the corporations are there, but there's a more elegant situation. The elegant situation is the divisionalizing of the unit, whereby you are actually having the best of two worlds. Is that you will have resources which are really required at a central level, and you will have resources at a regional level. You don't have a company secretary at a Bangalore outfit of a multinational. You have a company secretary at the head office in Delhi or Bombay. But you have a corporation, you'll have to have a company secretary everywhere. In 5 corporations. I'm just giving you an idea. Yeah. Treasurer everywhere. Overheads. We can't even manage our bank accounts in BBMP at a centralized level. There's confusion on the banking system, bank accounts, and where the money is coming and where it's going. 5 corporations, multiply that problem about 5 times because the number of accounts will now increase. Financial. So and the leakages and whatever else you want. So, but I think anyway, the point here is, as far as I am concerned, is that I can talk about it. But I come from a school of thought of I don't have a solution, and no 5 wise men have the solution either. And for me, most expert committees from various other things, except if the expert committee is for a very technical purpose, where the experts really know structural engineering, etc., etc., etc. All the rest seem to have a God complex. And they forget that we live in a democracy and we live in a socialistic democracy. And they forget that and they get into that I know better. While the Constitution and even just logic states that there is a process to decision making, a process for this. I mean, if we are looking at some drastic things of Bangalore at even a ethical level, isn't this something which should be there for public debate for years if required, at various levels required, at a moral, ethical level? But as I said, there are committees which have this God complex, and I call it the 3 wise men approach, 5 wise men approach. 5 wise men can solve the problems of the world. It doesn't work that way. It does not actually work that way. Except if it's a very technical issue, if it's a specific knowledge-based issue, not in the governance area and things like that.
There seems to be this also, the incremental approaches are not favored for their optics. You want to just do the decentralization at zonal level, look at revenue, P&L at zonal levels, increase the staffing at zonal levels, monitor that. There is nothing for the politician to sell. Look, I did this, right?
Agreed.
And it is harder to push for these incremental gains. And we want a shock and awe everywhere,
Big bang,
I
shock and
left this legacy, and I'm going to be remembered. That's a big. All of them want to leave a legacy, right?
You're absolutely right. All these things is the God is in the details. God is not in the big canvas painting issues. It is in the details. And you ask the question, what do we do for Bangalore? Ultimately, it is those steps. There are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts and no solutions where you say, whoa, one huge system and all that. There are inherent issues, and we have to work at that. And the results will come with that approach.
So let's take that example, and let's say we get divided into 400 wards, right? Is it even manageable for people sitting in Hudson Circle to manage 400 watts when they can't even manage 200 properly? And one of the reasons ostensibly is if we just divided them up and gave it to the local and then let that be, maybe they'll manage it better and they'll hire better. Okay, it's all a maybe. But there is also this unwieldiness we are worried about now by dividing it up even further. There isn't even a building that can seat so much, so they have to rebuild corporation anyway. But so that brings me to this question. Okay, we'll come back to the 5 wise men. There has to be a process which includes and lots of debates. I myself have had at least 3 conversations on this topic, and yours is the 4th. And we still don't seem to have, but we have some ideas, right? This incremental approach, nobody wants to buy it. So nobody wants to do it. How do we sell this? Maybe if we did the shock and awe, under that, we can probably give this corporation more money and tell them, okay, go do this. That's one approach by the wise men. How many more wise men does it need? What do you and I even know about this to be able to opine? We can discuss this and say incremental is good. Can we bring enough pressure to say, let's do the incremental, because it's not happening? Nobody is wanting to claim this incremental approach, even if it fixes, which, like you said, is there in the report. You really need staffing at the higher orders, not group C and D, right? Or otherwise, you should be able to work with people to do that. How do you see any reforms happening just because this is the right thing to do and there is no selling of that? It is not going to be done. How are we going to move any of this increment? Everywhere the incremental approach works, but nobody is there saying, look, I did an incremental thing. I'd much rather have an 18-kilometer tunnel road than put public transport.
There are a couple of ways to do it. Is that one, don't call it incremental.
Okay.
If you call it incremental, we're in trouble. But for instance, just let's say, to set it, of course, the bureaucracy will jump on the head, right? The service rules of the administration is being revamped. A huge exercise, right? Which relooks at the service rules of the administration, which means the IAS, the KAS officers, etc., which will go a long way with the citizens of Bangalore. Politically extremely powerful, saying that we are revamping it, making it accountable, the classical accountable, transparent, etc. Which one of the problems is that the bureaucracy is not accountable, and therefore, we can talk, we can jump, we can do that. We can have 5 corporations, we can have 10 corporations, we can decentralize, we can do everything else. But if the accountability angle is not done, which comes from the service rules, which comes from the KMC Act and things like that, that is highly doable. That's highly doable. And so there is a stance for the people, right? As far as the politicians, they must realize is that, boss, you still have control. Whatever the system, you still have the control. The oversight is still with the politicians. I mean, we are a representative society, political system. We have elected the chief minister. We have elected the MLAs, and they have oversight of the city. Remember that. Remember the chief minister and the state government has oversight. Whether you and me want to stop the money leak, we are not going to be able to do it. They'll find in any system the method of siphoning the money. So I'm not even going there. So I think it's a question of, well, ultimately, I do think we need one very elected, powerful person who will take that. It's not going to happen otherwise. It's not going to happen otherwise. We can definitely sell it to them, saying that we're building up one area. I was just taking the example of service. Service might be a hot potato, but actually, for a politician, it's not very hot.
Because everything seems to be a hot potato for them. You talk about financial restructuring, hot potato. You try to do service rules, they won't touch it because there is an embedded system.
See, I'll just give you an idea of my organization, Citizens Action Forum, how we look at it. Okay, how we look at it is that we don't have the reach to do mass movement of people and do systemic changes within the government. That is difficult for us. We are not very good at it. We might have solutions, etc. Also, we have always believed inherently that we are not solution providers. We are process, and the process is nothing original. It is basically the processes which are already there. We have to follow that. So what we have found is by stopping something which we believe is unconstitutional and is not a process, forces the government to find another way, closer and closer and closer to the process that we want. It's not overnight. It doesn't happen. So master planning exercises, etc., the exercises, etc. Many things we have put spoke in the wheel. That's the best we can do at the moment. We will try. We will resist going to the table and saying that we have an idea and we want to work together with the government, because we have found the negative part of that issue. Yeah, I mean, the government is famous for taking your ideas and then taking one aspect of that idea out of context and then having a fall guy to say, but that was their idea, right? It's not our idea. Okay. So putting pressure on the government in different directions, especially by not moving forward. For instance, we are debating whether this whole 58 kilometers of underground roads, which is there, whether we should actually challenge it at the right time, of course, right? Because constitutionally it's invalid, because you cannot build a road which is not there in the master plan. And where is the master plan? There is no master plan. Why is there no master plan? The master plan can only happen by the MPC. Why is there no MPC? Because there is no elections. So it's a question of pushing them into a particular area by making, and I would say I'll use that word, by stopping their money making, or at least some of their money making ventures. Not all. I do not have the reach or the intelligence or the methods to do that, but some of the most scatterbrained, let's call it, very vocal kind of stances. If you put a stop to that, it does force them to little by think, yeah, boss, if you want to do it, then we have to follow this particular process. Maybe that works. The other thing is that there are people from the citizenry who are close to the government, right? They work with the government and they are on expert panels. I suppose they have to change their lingo. They have to change their lingo, and they have to change what works. And I think we can educate the government, but I think we need to educate ourselves and our civic activists, because all said and done, a lot of them are looking at quick solutions or just big bang solutions, but not really looking at the hardworking stuff. Nobody wants to do the hardworking stuff.
So what's your roadmap for BBMP? Is the status quo okay? What are the three different things? Of course, you come from the process standpoint. The process very clearly in the 74th Amendment uses the clause, the state may constitute award committee, the state may hold election. There are lots of mays in that and not a shall. I know that it can still be held. What is your view on that? This is standard
all that's
excuse.
Passed. All that is passed. Mm-hmm. As far as state is concerned, state has taken it. State has passed it. It's the 74th Amendment. First of all, was supposed to be taken into the state in 6 months' time, 1 year's time.
Correct.
Which took its own sweet time. And it was forced by legal action by civic activists. So the entire NPC Act has been brought into the state government. Now the fight is how to make that work. So the May, I'm just saying, I know the language you're talking about. The May, etc. That part is over because the state has adopted it. Has adopted the Constitution, 74th Amendment, and with the rules. There are problems with the rules as a separate issue. It's a less of an issue. Again, I will only have to say that what we can do, SCAF and myself, is that we are going to fight this BBMP issue. There are other things to be fought, but BBMP issue on two ways. One, we will keep our ears and eyes wide open as far as the GBA bill is concerned. If the GBA bill, after going through whatever negotiations they have there, if it gets passed in the what do you call it? Assembly, it has to still go. It has to go council, assembly, then it has to still go to the upper house, and then it has to go to the governor for assent. So we'll follow the paper everywhere and try to put our pressures through media and writings and appealing whatever level. After that, we are ready to take it up to the legal case and go up to the Supreme Court. And we have already briefed our lawyers, who are a great bunch of people who are doing it for us on a practically pro bono basis, and very senior people who already are sold on it. So we are perfectly ready on that. On the other side, we will go to the Supreme Court and see how best we can force the BBMP elections. And actually make sure that that the state government has little wiggle room to not conduct the councillor elections. If the councillor election comes up, then as far as we are concerned, then the base is there to build on top of that. If you don't have that, we are not building on a foundation of either democracy or on our constitution. After that, ideas and etc. and how to improve efficiencies, etc. 3 corporations, 4 corporations, 5 corporations, centralized, non-centralized, staffing, all that can happen. And they are debates which should happen, but not on a weak foundation, not on a foundation which is not there. What comes first?
I would like to summarize 2 things. One is, don't use this as an excuse to continue to delay the BBMP elections, which need to happen. Once that trigger has been established and that is not held hostage, the next step is to say, if the constitutional amendment says this is 74th amendment says this is the way you do it, don't try to introduce clever tricks in the middle. Just do it the way it has been said. That way you can hold people honest and it doesn't have to have wacky ideas just because somebody needs to be convinced. But I would still ask you, there is a case to not have BBMP and Bengaluru grow. The real estate might not want that. They would want a metro city tag and only 4 of them have it. It increases real estate value, all of those things. Do you still believe that Bengaluru is unwieldy even if you did all of these things, even if you build capacity everywhere? Is there a case for having smaller corporations?
No, there are 2 parts to your question. Is Bangalore unwieldy and will it get even more unwieldy? Yes. And is that desirable? No. But I don't think the solution is cooperating or splitting it up. The solution there is Karnataka, is regional development, and the name or whether it's Ramnagara or something else, it does not matter. There is a geography called Bangalore. You want to extend it to a little bit or you want to cut it down to a little bit, fine. That's not a problem in my mind. But you have only one magnet in the state. You have only one magnet in the state. So what is going to happen? That's where the problem is. We do not have even a Peenya flourishing. Peenya is, of course, within Bangalore. We don't have a Tumkuru which is flourishing. So, and you know that, I mean, part of that is connectivity and part of that is, connectivity is a big part of it, that particular thing. Those are the areas which will decongest Bangalore or make Bangalore, limit Bangalore by a natural self. The artificial methods of doing it, by either by cesses or taxes or this or that or disincentivizing and all that, don't really create, especially definitely not in our system. We have to create. We have to create different magnets.
It's continually growing little by little. Occupy this. Tomorrow, if Tumkur gets attractive and somebody comes from there as a day, Bangalore city minister, they'll say, "Oh, now Tumkur is going to be Bangalore." So there has to be a stop somewhere. You're saying just stop it, don't grow it, but don't split it.
Don't split it. Split it. Do it administratively. For heaven's sake, right now. You have the systems, you have your zones, you want to have 5 zones, you want to have 6 zones, you have 7 zones. Use all the logic that you had, which was there in the so-called GBA or splitting into 5 or 6 or another. Use all that logic into a more administrative zonal method. Build up much more stronger, which gives you the best of two worlds: a decentralized and a centralized resource. Once you have a corporation, you will find that that guy will not be able to draw power from this from other resources. He will not be able to draw power from the center. Power meaning people, manpower, etc. That flexibility we still need. We still need that flexibility. In the older method of head office and branches, we still need that flexibility rather than the other one is actually you're creating walls. You're creating walls. You're creating an unfair. First of all, it will be an unfair competition in some cases, and you will not have seamless movement of thing. And trying to coordinate that, it'll be a nightmare. It's an administrative and implementation nightmare. 5 things. It looks beautiful on paper, but just think through it, and the amount of havoc that's going to happen, and ultimately that havoc will be borne by the citizens.
Thanks always for coming on the show. And I told you it's not going to be 25 minutes.
No, I enjoy my conversations with you, all the time.
All right.
There's something solid.